Hi there, and welcome back to another episode of the Sitting in a Car podcast. I'm Sarah Sproul, and I sit in a car answering questions from parents about sex. You and I sit in a car together every week and talk about how to raise a confident and caring young person who respects themselves and the people around them. So this week's question is from a parent who I met at one of the talks I did this week at a national school. What should my 6-year-old know about sex? I remember when I started my master's degree in sexuality, and I was reading a lot about how to talk to kids about sexuality and what kids could learn at different ages. And one thing that was really a big sort of eye-opening discovery was that a lot of adults will talk to kids about sex as being a way to make a new human or to create a baby, when the reality of it is the vast majority of sexual experiences that humans have is more to do with the joy of sex or the pleasure of interacting with someone who we care about, love and respect in that intimate way. So I had to go back to my kids and say, oh, guess what I learnt this week that I realized I haven't told you? And they were going, what? And I said, most people have sex because it just feels nice, not because they want to make a baby. And the kids were like, oh, okay. And because those conversations were part of our everyday thing. But I became very conscious of making sure that the message about sex is something that feels good became one of the more basic concepts in our family, rather than talking about sex as making babies, because it just means that our kid will realize that we understand that when they're discovering their sexuality and engaging with another young person or a young adult, and they're starting to find all that out, that they know they can come to us if they have a question or a problem, because we understand that is part of being a sexual human being. Right, so the first point to make for a 6-year-old, and you don't have to sit the 6-year-old and stare them in the eyeballs over the dining room table and say these things, but just in the course of interaction, like I'm looking over there at the passenger seat, because one of the ways you can do that is to sit in a car. Yes, it is indeed sitting in a car. So sex is something that feels good. And that is really important information, because then a young person will understand if sex doesn't feel good, then there's something not right. Okay, if they've learned that from a very early age, they'll know if this doesn't feel good, then something's wrong. A good friend of mine and colleague, Anna Keogh, she works as a youth worker, and she's also a sexuality educator. She says that actually consent is measured, really, like consent is present when there is fun and pleasure, so for all the people involved. So that's just a little tidbit that I learned from Anna. Okay. The next thing you can say is that sex usually involves people's genitals being touched so that they feel nice. And you could also say that genitals can be touched by lots of different parts of another person's body, and oftentimes by their genitals too. So two sets of genitals coming together. And you see how I'm saying it? I'm saying it quite wordy, but you could say it more simply to your kid. Well, sex is when our private parts, if you feel more comfortable with that, our private parts get touched by someone else, and it feels really good. I mean, you could also say at this point, because masturbation in some areas of sexuality education, masturbation is called self-loving or sex for one. And that's a really great topic, because if you introduce that idea when your child is young, when they become an adolescent or a teenager or a young adult, then they may feel less pressure to have sex with someone else, because they would consider that they're having sex with themselves. And if everyone else around them is saying, oh yeah, I want to have sex, they might have in the back of their head, well, actually, I am already having sex with myself, and they are learning what feels good. So that's just a by the by. You could say that some people have sex and some people don't, and that's absolutely okay. We're all different. We're all interested in different things, and some of us are particularly interested in having sex with other people. Some people think that lots of people should have sex, but the reality of it is that we're all individuals and we can all do the way it works for us. You can say that some sorts of sex makes babies. Babies need an egg and a sperm to come together, and some sorts of sex can create sperm and eggs in the same place. And you might say that's the sort of sex where a penis and a vagina come together. You could say that. You can say that we all learn how we like to have sex, and that it's something that people discover over time. We can discover all different things about ourselves for the whole of our life, and that you don't necessarily, or in fact nobody, knows what it's like to have sex just by being alive. That we all learn as we go along, and we don't necessarily learn from watching other people because our body is different to other people's bodies. So you notice that that is a nod to the idea that some young people will look at porn to work out how to have sex. But the reality of it is that even if it's porn that is good porn, in the sense that it shows consent and it shows sort of equal gender roles, it still isn't going to be useful to learn about what we like in our own bodies, but our kids like in their own bodies. So this idea that you learn slowly over time is a really useful idea for our kids to know about, and you can start talking about that very early. Just like you can use an example, like, you know how you've just started to learn how to swim, and how you've been going for a few weeks now and your body is slowly getting used to what it feels like to walk through water. Well, our bodies also learn how to have sex that feels nice to us, and that takes a long time, and in fact it takes way longer than even learning how to swim. You could say that, or insert another sporting analogy. Okay, and when you're talking about this sort of thing, even with a 6-year-old, you're using broad terms, not absolute terms. So you're things like some people do, or some people like, or sometimes, or I know people who, or I've heard about people who, or and I haven't seen this, but I know that some people. And when you use those parts of sentences, then it gets this idea that everybody's different. Everybody's different, and we all learn about ourselves. And as long as we're respecting the difference in other people and not making other people do things that we want to do, even if they don't want to, then we're good. So that's a long but useful answer of the question, what should my 6-year-old know about sex? And that is Sitting in a Car for another week, where I have answered a question to help you raise a confident and caring young person who respects themselves and the people around them. Bye for now.